Welcome to The Explainer. So today, we're unpacking this massive, kind of quiet shift that's happening literally right beneath our noses. If you've been paying any attention to the news lately, you've probably noticed that homeschooling is surging. But the headlines, they often miss the real story. We're going to bypass the usual assumptions today and look at the real, hidden forces that are pushing parents toward non-traditional education options. By the end of our time together, you'll understand exactly how families are rethinking education from the ground up. When most folks look at the sheer mountain of work involved in homeschooling, their very first reaction is usually exactly this: why on earth would anyone actually do this? And hey, it's a totally fair reaction. But if we want to truly understand this shift, we have to flip the script. Instead of asking, why would anyone do this, we need to ask, what problem are they actually trying to solve? When you frame it that way, everything starts to make sense.
Act 1, Rethinking the Default Path. Okay, let's dive into this. For generations, the default assumption was basically a single, fixed track. You know the drill. Your kid turns a certain age, they go to the local school, and you just stay on that train route. You get on, and it takes you where it takes you. But today, that whole basic assumption is evolving into a broad set of options. It's like a family figuring out how to get across town. Sometimes taking a car makes sense. Sometimes you hop on the bus, or maybe you just walk, depending on the weather and what it costs. Families are looking at public schools, private schools, hybrid models, and co-ops in that exact same way. They're just hunting for the best vehicle for their specific journey.
So what actually pushes a family off that traditional track? Well, that brings us to Act 2, the 6 hidden pressures.
You see, families rarely just abandon traditional schools over one single dramatic explosion. Instead, it's more like a stack of hidden pressures that build up over time. The first one is fit. Look, a school can be objectively excellent, totally well-funded, highly respected, the whole shebang. But if it pinches a child like a poorly fitting shoe, well, it's still the wrong shoe, right? Traditional systems are, by design, built for the average pace. But if your kid needs to move around more, or maybe needs a slower morning, or just a quieter space, they can kind of feel invisible. Homeschooling basically becomes a way to adjust the shoe to the foot, rather than forcing the foot into a shoe that just doesn't fit.
Then we have the second pressure, attention. Now, attention is absolutely the fuel of learning. Imagine you're trying to listen to just one specific conversation in a highly noisy, super crowded room. The message is definitely there, but actually catching it, that takes immense effort. And honestly, this isn't a knock on teachers at all. It's just a predictable capacity limit of traditional classrooms. One teacher literally has to divide their focus among 20 or 30 kids. When parents start to feel like their child's learning is stalling out just because they're lost in the crowd, they naturally start looking elsewhere.
Pressure number 3 brings us to values. Because let's be real, education is never just about math and science. It's also teaching discipline, the definition of success, and what really counts as a good life. Think of it kind of like seasoning your food. 2 chefs can start with the exact same base ingredients, but the final meal tastes entirely different depending on what spices they add in, or what they leave out. Families simply want a say in that moral flavor. They want to ensure the environment shaping their kid actually aligns with their own faith, culture, or personal priorities.
Moving on to the fourth pressure, which is flexibility. Modern families are juggling a lot, right? Weird work hours, caregiving, constant travel, health issues, you name it. Traditional school is a lot like a super rigid meal plan. It looks beautifully organized on a spreadsheet, but the minute someone gets sick or your flight gets delayed, the whole plan completely breaks down in reality. Homeschooling really reduces that friction, allowing the education to bend without totally breaking the family's daily life.
And that brings us right to the fifth pressure, trust. Trust rarely snaps all at once. It actually works a lot like a tiny crack in a pane of glass. A confusing homework policy, a concern that gets brushed off by administration, a kid who is chronically bored, each of these is just a tiny little tap on the glass. But when that's repeated over years, the entire structure weakens. Eventually, the parent simply loses confidence that the system is the best place for their child. And this brilliantly illustrates the whole picture. When you stack up poor fit, limited attention, value mismatches, life friction, and eroding trust, and then you combine all of that with a sixth pressure, a deep desire for control over the pace and direction of learning, it completely reframes the narrative. Homeschooling isn't some mysterious, antisocial rejection of society. For sure, it is just a highly logical response to a mismatch.
Which leads us to Act 3, Unbundling the Education System.
So, we know the why, but what does this actually look like in practice? Well, in a traditional setup, one single institution does it all. They handle the content, the schedule, the socialization, the discipline. But alternative education, it breaks that bundle completely apart.
Families aren't just replacing school with mom sitting at the kitchen table. They are actively reassembling the pieces. For instance, a parent might teach history, an online program tackles the math, maybe a tutor handles science, and then a local co-op provides the group projects and socialization. It's totally decentralized.
Because of this massive unbundling, we now have this incredibly vibrant spectrum of arrangements. You've got parent-led models for maximum control, online setups for structure without the annoying morning commute, hybrid models, co-ops, and even unschooling, which is entirely child-led. So the absolute crucial point here is this. Whenever you look at any of these options, always ask yourself, what job is this specific alternative being asked to do for this specific family?
Now let's talk about Act 4, the trade-off of choice. Okay, we definitely need to do a reality check here. These highly customized, perfectly fitting educational paths, yeah, they aren't free. They are earned by taking on an immense amount of responsibility. Think of traditional schooling like a citywide bus route. It's highly efficient, everyone moves at a shared pace, and you don't even have to think about the route. But you have zero control over where it stops. Homeschooling, on the other hand, is like driving your own car. You have total control over the destination and the music. But guess what? You have to pay for the gas, you have to navigate the terrible traffic, and you have to actually do all the driving. You are fundamentally trading the convenience of an institution for total control. And that leads to a massive, often hidden labor cost. Flexibility sounds incredible on paper, but it forces the parent to carry the entire structure. You aren't just a parent anymore. Suddenly you're part teacher, part planner, part motivator, part monitor, and part logistics coordinator. Even if you use fancy tutors and online classes, the family is still the ultimate center of gravity. This is exactly why some families absolutely thrive in this environment, while others find it completely exhausting. Which brings us to the core takeaway of our whole explainer today. Education is not just a place. It is a design problem. Families are constantly trying to design a balance that fits their child's very specific constraints, their family's deeply held values, and the realities of their daily life. Once you view education through this specific lens, the future of schooling looks a lot less like some massive ideological battle and way more like a set of deeply human decisions made to solve real-world problems.
So, I want to leave you with this final, overarching question to really ponder. Who should organize a child's education? Should it be the institution, the family, or some new hybrid mix of both? The answer is literally shifting under our feet right now, and it's completely reshaping the future of how we learn. Thank you so much for diving into this explainer with me. Keep questioning the default and keep learning.